representatives of public and private sector organizations, captains of industry, distinguished guests, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you to this policy dialogue on the manufacturing sector, organized by the Ministry of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives, in collaboration with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa. We thank you for your presence this morning to make this event a success. As you might have seen, there has been a change in the program. So the official ceremony will be held around 11:30, meaning that we shall start right away with the plenary session and with the presentations of the different resource persons as per the program. I think you have seen on the program, the first presentation will be on the implementation of the IPSP. Again, good morning. We'll start with a presentation on the industrial implementation of the IPSP. As you have seen in the concept note, which has been circulated on behalf of UNECA and the ministry, this policy dialogue is a platform to share information, exchange views, and chart a way forward. Today, I'm pleased to share with you the achievements of the ministry in terms of the implementation of the IPSP, the Industrial Policy and Strategic Plan 2020-2025 for Mauritius. The progress made in the implementation of the IPSP testifies the ministry's readiness to promote the cause of industrial development in Mauritius. In my presentation, I shall talk briefly about the publication of the IPSP, the structure which has been put in place to ensure the proper implementation of the document, and then the 5 important strategic thrusts, the pillars of the document, namely industry for foundations, upgrading of value chains, increased domestic supply, regional and global export growth, and advanced technology. And then we would go into the subsectoral aspects, mentioning briefly about the achievements in textile, food, medical devices, and jewelry. As you all may be knowing, the IPSP was launched in December 2020, and it was prepared with the assistance, the financial and technical assistance of UNCTAD. The document was launched in December 2020, and immediately after the launching of the document, the minister set up the Industrial Policy Executive Oversight Committee, the IPEOC, under the chairpersonship of our PS here, of the Industrial Development Division. In fact, the IPSP revolves around 5 pillars. We have just mentioned the 5 pillars, covering 22 recommendations. And then after the first sitting of the IPEOC, 8 subcommittees were set up to really see the sectoral aspects of the recommendation. The subcommittees, there were 3 subcommittees which were based on focus areas. Out of the 8 subcommittees set up, 3 subcommittees were based on focus areas which were mentioned in the IPSP, namely industry foundations, regional growth, export, advanced technology. And then sectoral, domestic, textile, food and fish preparation, medical devices, and jewelry. Maybe you have seen that in the first meeting, this chairpersonship, apart from me, there is Mr. Bhaktuan Singh for regional growth, Mr. Hawabai for advanced technology, Mrs. Narayanan for domestic enterprise, and then textile is chaired by Mrs. Ramsamirana from FDI, food processing chaired by Mr. Elai Doman, medical device by Mr. Achas here, and then jewelry sector, Mr. Ram Kilawan. We are very thankful to these people for running these subcommittees and to ensure that the recommendations are implemented. The seriousness of this exercise of the most of the subcommittees that the fact that they are being chaired by leading people from the public and private sector and assisted by representatives of the ministry. This shows the seriousness of the ministry in implementing the IPSP. Now we go to the 5 strategic thrusts of the IPSP, which is industry foundations, upgrading of value chains, increasing domestic market supply, regional growth, regional and global export growth, and then advanced technology absorption. We'll go quickly on the recommendations on the implementation status of these pillars. First is in the industry foundation pillar, there are 7 recommendations. 3 covers skills development and labor flexibility. There we wish to inform you that in November last year we had a skill development workshop with many of stakeholders, private, public, and stakeholders, where we considered all the publications, HRDC and the AMM publication also. And in broad, there were about 5, apart from the sectoral recommendations, 5 recommendations. I'll go through them quickly. Requirement of 5,000 skilled workers for the next 5 years. Industrial skills we need to match the industrial skills with academic and vocational curricula. This is very important. And we have to develop an attractive career path for new recruits in the sector. We build the image and enhance the visibility of the sector. And then review the procedure of recruiting professional expatriates for the manufacturing sector. I think this is broadly what has been recommended. There are some detailed recommendation on the sectors there, and there is a great need for favorable condition for the recruitment of foreign labor. This is a very big achievement in December, because the skills is very important for the sector, and we have been able to at least open the eyes of all stakeholders on the need of skills, because it is one of the important aspects of industry foundations. So the other aspects of industry foundations, domestic accreditation capabilities. On this aspect, two lab schemes have been set up at the level of Mauritius. On the digital roadmap, I don't know whether Mr. Hawaii is there. They're working hard on a project document which will be submitted to donor agencies. This is a very important thing to move the industry foundation. And then some of the part of the project of industrial roadmap is being applied at the level of MPCC with the Go Digital, for SMEs, which has been launched some weeks back. With regards to the standards of industrial states, just to mention that a development has occurred. Government has set up the Kudo Technology Park. I think Mr. Achas knows well about it, the Ava Technology Park. And then with regards to port operation, which is very important for Mauritius, being an export-oriented country, port operations is very important. And there is a committee at the level of EDB which is working on this, and they are thrashing the details of the the performance of the port and all the port aspects, which is very important, of course, for the industry foundations. I think the most important aspect of the IPSP, I think most of those who have gone through a report, and even the consultant has said that this is the core aspect of the IPSP. He has recommended a manufacturing upgrading fund and a manufacturing investment support fund. That was in the report. And then establish a technology innovation fund. We worked, I think, Ministry and ISP and many stakeholders worked very hard on this before last budget. And we are happy to announce that the Industrial Finance Corporation of Mauritius will replace the investment support program. And the IFCM has been entrusted the responsibility of managing the new modernization and transformation fund of 5 million, which has been put at the disposal of enterprises. The IFCM will undertake leasing and factoring facilities for the enterprises. This is a very important aspect because we have been waiting for a long time for this, because this is supposed to trigger this budget measure is supposed to bring a lot of change in the manufacturing sector, because many projects which are lying in the action plan, the funding depends on this scheme, and which the consultant agreed and has recommended in his report. This is a very important one, and that's why we want to inform stakeholders today that this fund now will be operational soon, and it's good that all operators take benefit of this, and will make sure that they are in connection with these sort of facilities, because it is very, very crucial for the manufacturing sector. The next pillar, which has been identified in the IPSP, of course, is increased domestic supply. The IPSP has given a new life to the local production, because for some time the domestic-oriented enterprise, which is still a strategy for government, did not get the attention, and following the observation of the consultant and, of course, a meeting with the private sector stakeholders, and then in the budget also, there has been a lot of projects and a lot of proposals made for the industry, for the local sector. With regards to market certification, I'll go through the recommendations for that sector quickly. With regards to market certification, just to inform you, MSB has put in place a certification program. A competition authority to monitor this monopsonic trade practices. This is being presently looked after by the Ministry of Commerce. The authority is presently being organized. And then Made in Maurice, maybe later on Bruno will talk a bit more about this. There are financial incentives which have been provided in the budget to encourage enterprise to adhere to the Made in Maurice. And local procurement, some measures are still being worked out. Review of Mauritius, the PTAs we have signed. This is another very important aspect. I think Mrs. Amjan Ali, maybe later on she'll talk about this. We want to make sure that whatever PTAs we have signed, we benefit from this. And that's why I think already work has already started, and several committees are looking seriously about follow-up on these issues. I think there's a lot of work being done on this issue, and I think many of the stakeholders are already on board in these meetings. Export potential of domestic certification model. This is embedded in the incentives, which will be given by the Modernization Fund. This will encourage other people to go into this aspect. The regional and global export. There are five aspects of this. Warehousing, I think you are aware that a project has been implemented in Tanzania. Export credit guarantee. The export credit insurance scheme is being operated by EDB. Regional value chains. On this aspect, various efforts are being made to promote these value chains in the region. Because there are obstacles in exports, that's why we are trying to avoid these obstacles, and then try to increase our value chain to the region. And just to mention that the ministry is proud to announce that Mauritius is among the few to have ratified the SADC protocol on industry. In fact, the text, the ministry worked out most of the text for the protocol, and the text is in line with our strategy, with our export strategy also. So we expect the SADC protocol to be extremely beneficial to our country. Only that there are major partners which have not yet ratified the protocol, but Mauritius is always ahead. We have signed the protocol to show that we mean business on the regional market. Market access, I think you have I've mentioned that the EDB has some economic commission which is tackling the obstacles to streamline export procedures to increase trade flows to many countries. And then warehousing to to other countries. We are exploring the possibilities to have feasibilities on this with some donor countries to get some feasibility study on it. Now, the last one is crucial for Mauritius. We have said that if we want to innovate, we will have to move, to give a boost to our productivity. We need this technology absorption. This works together with the modernization fund, because there is an aspect in the modernization fund which will cover activities in the advanced technology. This is very, very important and very crucial that Mauritius modernizes. I know many enterprises have already embraced advanced technologies, but there are some enterprises who have yet to adopt the latest technologies. And I think the modernization fund will have to help them on this. This is where it caters for their need. It should cater for their need. So at the level, just to inform you that at the level of ICT, because on this aspect, on advanced technology and the ICT, our ministry, represented by Mr. Mutusami, is working very hard with the ICT, because you cannot do anything on technology innovation without knowing what is going on in ICT in the digital field. That's why he's closely working with ICT people, with Mr. Hawabai, and they have mentioned that Emerging Technology Council is being set up at the level of the Ministry of IT, and it will help our drive, the Ministry drive, to promote the adoption of advanced technology. We have to link both, otherwise we cannot have a different, go in different way. This is there, and they're working on a project seriously. We'll see where we can get the project implemented. And we have also mentioned the digital roadmap. This strategy also, it is connected to the digital roadmap. So these are all the 5 pillars. Just the sectoral. Quickly, I'll go on the sectoral aspects, just to mention, because we have to. Several committees have worked on these, and they have achieved certain things. Broadly, just to give you broadly the achievements. In the textile clothing sector, we had around 4 strategies related to human capital, the enabling environment, access to technology, and export promotion. And on the human capital, we can say that the skills workshop held last year has addressed a lot on the human capital for this sector. Business environment, financial schemes, sustainable production, port services, institutional support, and IT infrastructure. There has been some improvement, though work is going on this also. Export promotion, we have mentioned also that the MTF fund, and then the PTA is being reviewed by the ministries concerned and with the committees concerned. Food processing and fish, there are 4 strategies, again, skills, enhancing capacity, upgrading technological capabilities, and export promotion. These are generic strategies which are cross-cutting in all the sectors. The skills, again, it has been addressed by the skills workshop. Now we have to get these recommendations implemented. Of course, we envisage that the upgrading of technologies in this subsector is helped by the MTF fund, which has been set up. Export promotion, I think maybe Girish will tell you later on. Efforts made by UDB to modernize is being there, and then the modernization and transformation fund will help also in this aspect. Medical devices, there were 5 strategies relating to legal framework, boosting the sector, skills again, enabling environment, which is again there, and then export promotion. And we are proud to mention that 16 measures were already implemented in the budget 2020-21. Most of these measures relate to tax incentive, IP, and exports. And then, of course, skills has been addressed in the skills report. Jewelry, again, the generic strategies, skills, access to technology, and increased visibility in the international markets. Skills, again, they have talked a lot about skills in the workshop on the jewelry sector. Now we have to implement. And then training programs, tax incentives, export promotion, and financial assistance are being provided. There's an improvement, but there's still work going on. So these are the status of recommendations in the 5 pillars and in the subsectors. So the work is going on. The committees are meeting, but the work is going on. We are proud to say that around 50% of the recommendations are in the process of being implemented. There are some constraints. There are some time period for implementation also. Some projects have to be implemented in the short term, but others maybe in the long term. That's why not all projects are implemented with these 2 years. But it's a very high figure, and we can say that the ministry has worked very hard under the leadership of the permanent secretary, Mrs. Ahmed here, because she has been chairing the IPOC and then pushing on all the meetings to be held on the staffs. The staff has worked a lot, hard on this implementation, everybody, and there's work to be done also. And the modernization fund will be the game changer for the manufacturing. We hope it will be, and we encourage enterprises, as I say again, to come forward to try to benefit from this. And during this workshop, maybe later on the minister will invite people, stakeholders. We can come forward if, based on what we have said, what we are saying, what we'll say in the sessions there. Stakeholders are invited to come with proposals so that we can take it later on. We can present it even for the budget budget proposal. So you are encouraged to give any suggestion and proposal. This is all for the implementation. I thank you very much for your attention. And I say work is going on, and the ministry is very keen to the cause of industrial development. That's why the minister also is regularly chairing meetings to follow up on this implementation. We are taking the job seriously, and I think most of the stakeholders, we rest assured that together, because we are working with the stakeholders. I forgot to mention that most of the committees which are being working on the implementation, they are most of the personalities from the private sector and some from the public sector which are chairing the committee. They are knowledgeable people, and they will make it happen for the committee there. Thank you very much. I now invite the next speaker. The next speaker will be Yusuf Ismail. Yusuf Ismail is the Secretary General of the Mauritius Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Mauritius. In his current role, he provides strategic leadership to the Chamber, enhances its regional and international network, engages in advocacy on diverse issues, and contributes to the economic development of the country through strategies. He serves, which is important, he serves as board member of the Mauritius MSB, or SMEs, COVID-19 Development Fund, the Port Louis Development Fund, and the Industrial Finance Corporation of Mauritius. He is also the director of SADC Business Council and COMESA Business Council. And then he also serves as CEO of Global Standard I. I have the pleasure now to invite Yusuf for his.
Thank you, Dr. Duman, Mrs. Abdul Rahman, PS at the Ministry of Industrial Development, SMEs Cooperative, Ms. Isatu Gai, Chief Sub-Regional Initiative Section from the UNICA Sub-Office. I also acknowledge the presence of Mr. Bidesi, the CEO of IFCM, Mr. Bruno Dubari from IMM, and also our good friend from UNICA, who's also here, Mrs. Bulaki. So I think, and friends and colleagues and captivating industry, I've been given the crystal ball this morning to talk about the future of the Mauritian manufacturing sector. So good morning to all of you. Let me just give you, first of all, an overview of the Mauritian manufacturing sector in figures. The sector itself has an output of 108 billion, which is a quarter of the GDP of the country. 35% of that is destined for export, and we have around 234 export-oriented enterprise and some 357 domestic enterprise, and employed about 90,000 employees in that sector, with a foreign labor of almost 20,000. That is how significant this sector is for the Mauritian economy. We have moved a lot towards the service industry, but the pillar of any economy remains on the actual industrial foundation. I think this is why we're here. This is why we want this industry foundation to get bigger, and it's important that we address all the issues that we are facing as an industry. Also, just a note on the SME. SMEs contributes almost to 48% of total employment and around 48% of share of the GDP, and employs about 184,000 people in the industry, mainly in terms of wholesale, but manufacturing employs about 37 directly. What are the subsectors we're focusing on? It's quite limited, unfortunately. It's limited to textile and clothing, which employs a vast chunk of the employment and revenue. Agro-processing, which includes wine and spirits and rum. Sugar industry, the seafood and fish preparation, jewelry sector, which I spoke. Pharmaceutical sector, which is still very small, but also in terms of light engineering and wood processing, I can also see one of the SMEs here present in that sector. What is happening in the changes in the landscape? I think traditional manufacturing has changed for the following reason. First, we have to acknowledge that the consumer demand has changed. It's more about personalization and more about customization. The traditional way of thinking that we are the best at doing what we do is no longer true. You have to understand what the consumer wants. You have to customize according to the consumers. This is the advantage of Mauritius, because we're a small country. We can adapt quickly to the demand of consumers, unlike China, where you go and order something, they actually need at least 6-7 million pieces, whereas in Mauritius, you can deliver small quantities. This is our competitive and comparative advantage. Secondly, the nature of the products itself is changing. We are moving away from dumb to smart products. We're moving away from product to platform, and also from product to services. That is something that we have to take into consideration whenever we as manufacturers needs to have strategic direction. Thirdly, the economics of the value chain itself is changing. So the value chain is eroding in terms of value proposition and for intermediaries. In the past, you produce and the chain gets longer and longer. At the end of the day, the manufacturers doesn't get a lot. That is being shortened, is direct to the customers, and the profit comes back to you. The direct consumer engagement is important, looking for the future, no longer having layers and layers of intermediaries where you lose your profit and your revenue, and also build to order versus build to stock. That is essential, because stock costs money. What is the point of building a lot of stock when you can't sell? So I think building to order is how you adapt to changes in that sector. And also the economics of production itself, more towards exponential technologies, which have been mentioned by Dr. Dumont, eroding barriers to learning. Before, you only know yourself, but now you can learn on the internet, learn on YouTube, and so on and so forth. And also emerging manufacturing models are also changing. What is happening in the private sector initiative for the future, which is what we are looking for, and we want our members and our industry to think and believe in, is about data analytics. You have to analyze the data. You need to know what is going on about your performance of your industry, about the output of industry. All these are important to analyze. Big data is important. That gives you an advantage. Forget finance. We always complain that you need finance for a manufacturing sector to grow, but no. Always there are other factors that you need to look at in terms of analyzing data day in, day out. Look how you can become more efficient. The second one is looking at the global value chain. You cannot just think that you will produce and then export, but your value chain is global now. You should be part of the value chain. You cannot be the person who does everything yourself, so be part of a chain. Don't think that you'll be doing everything yourself. Thirdly, it's about cyber physical production. Everything is going cyber. You can produce here and print and deliver somewhere else. We are moving more towards servicification. So it's not just about production, but how you service your client. Circular economy is important in terms of waste, in terms of plastic issues, about industrial waste. There's money in waste. People think waste is waste, but there is money in a lot of waste. I think this is an area where we want to look at, but also in terms of the environment, protecting the environment by remanufacturing, by using circular economy. In the textile industries, we have a lot of pallets, which goes all over the places, but that can be used for chairs and other furnitures. Your textile drums that have a lot of liquid that comes, that can be used for production of plants, for example, that pot to produce these plants and sell. And also towards additive manufacturing. In the past, you used to cut and have a lot of waste. Now with technology of printing, 3D printing, you add layers and layers. On metal, you add layers instead of cutting. Cutting have a lot of waste. So reduction of waste can be done by having additive manufacturing, by printing, for example. You add layers and layers, that will help you. And also cross-domain skill. So no longer that you're just one skill, you have to be multi-skill, which is what we are encouraging our members to be, to have, people with different types of skill. And also in terms of manufacturing for the region, it's a shame that we think of exporting to Europe, to China, to South Africa, but we don't think of exporting in the region. It's a huge demand in the region, but manufacture for the region, getting you supply from the region, and also the digital infrastructure, which has been discussed earlier by Dr. Duman. What is happening in the manufacturing metrics? In the past, we're focusing on the competitiveness based on value added, export quality and quantity, productivity and production. That is no longer true. It is true, but you need to move more towards focus on addressing the gaps in your performance, in your capability as well. Because if you don't address that, you will not be competitive. No matter how much you have in terms of value addition, you will not be able to match the rest if you don't have address the gaps in your performance and also in your capabilities to perform. But helps also better understand the evolution of manufacturing countries. The competitors are moving faster than us, so we cannot just sit behind and think that we are best and we will remain the best. We won't. We also, in the past, look at inform business and government about the status quo, what is going wrong. We always moan about what's not going wrong, what's not going right. But we need now to inform businesses and government leaders through knowledge connection and about preparedness for drivers of future manufacturing. This is how we need to engage with authorities. Going and saying to the government something is wrong, okay, but how do we engage in terms of connection about preparedness for the drivers of the future? And lastly, in the past, we used to focus on increasing percentage of manufacturing for gross domestic product. We always say we represent 30-40% of GDP. That is not a statistics that is of value anymore. What is of value now is to acknowledge an increased conversion of skills, new materials, focus on new production methods, and also focus on higher value goods. That is what we should be doing. Statistics about GDP is not relevant. It is relevant, but should not be relevant. We should be more towards looking at how do we convert our skills, raw material, production methods, and also how do we achieve higher value goods. We have discussed, before I go on that slide, I think we have some issues to address, fundamental issues that we need to address. The issues that we need to address is the competitive advantage that we have, whether we have it or not, the comparative advantage that we have, and we need to analyze that well. What is the cost of production in the country? How the issues of labor needs to be addressed. The issue of technology should be addressed. And we also make an appeal to authorities to look at legislation when they are put into place, because that can work in the disadvantage of the manufacturing sector. A simple example is the introduction of sugar tax, for example, because if you're going to tax on sugar for export, then you're not going to be competitive for export. So those who are manufacturing, for example, ice cream for export to Madagascar will be penalized because that taxation will increase the cost. The use of plastic, which we are for, moving towards a waste-free plastic industry, but this legislation needs time, needs to adapt to these changes, and they need to have a roadmap and also a regulatory impact assessment on these, so we can, together, the government, authorities, and institutions, with the SMEs, work together to achieve, but give them the time, give them the support required. We have discussed about issues of skilling. I'm not going to in detail. We have a problem of skills. We have people do not think that working manufacturing is good enough. They want to get a job in the public sector or the private sector, working in an office, but there's so many jobs in terms of automation. I was talking to a couple of youngsters about mechatronics. They tell me, what is mechatronics? Mechatronics is so important in production. How you use mechanical and electrical engineering, because everything is automated. If you don't have the pool of mechatronics in this country, production efficiency will not improve. And also in terms of manufacturing, provide appropriate land, manufacturing enterprise. Our land is being sold for property development, but we are not having enough land for manufacturing. I think it's an appeal that we're making. Industrial park, that was a success of Mauritius in the 80s. We have an industrial zone. People were coming and they were working together, having a network that used to work well. The rest is about technology development, improve access to finance, and I'm happy today to hear that IFCM is operational. IFCM is a game changer because it's supply, working capital. It's not about finance. It's how you improve working capital of companies. It is how they assist companies to change. It's about advisory, it's about working capital, it's about finding solution. If you look at the supply chain or value chain, if somebody in that supply chain have a problem, the whole system collapses. But if you support the supply chain by supply chain financing, for example, everyone in supply chain is supported. And when they're supported, everything becomes more efficient. Cash flow becomes not an issue at all. And also in terms of improved marketing and regional export capacity, we are now a big exporter to South Africa, thanks to Enterprise Mauritius, by having a lot of, my colleague Girish will tell that story to me all the time. You are going there, meeting people, connecting people. That is how marketing should be done. I think Rishi has already spoken about these 4 pillars. I'm not going to repeat that. I'm going to move towards a very important opportunity which we should not let go of. It's about the trade agreement that we have signed. It's good to sign trade agreement, but they remain dormant. I think we make an appeal that we work closely, the industry, the ambassadors and other countries, to make the most of the free trade agreement that we have signed. Last year we have signed with China, which we can export up to 8,000 types of goods and services. We have signed with India, and the AFCTA is in place. But in the past, we have signed others. We have signed with Pakistan, we have signed with Turkey, EU, UK EPA, and AGOA. In addition, we're also part of COMESA, which we can export, and also part of SADC. And also the Indian Ocean Rim countries, we can have a lot of benefit. But how do we tap in? How do we connect these players exporting or using Mauritius as a base to tap into these opportunities? I'll give you a simple example how it works. Mozambique is a good producer of cashew nuts. The cashew nuts goes from Mozambique, it goes to India for sorting, grading, curing, it goes to Singapore for packaging, and then export to Europe, and then sell back to Mauritius. That is how it works. Another example I'll give you, lychees from Seychelles import lychees from South Africa, but the lychees come from Mauritius. So that's how it works. So I think it's important. I will give you how it works. It's important. We're a textile manufacturing country. We should stop me if I'm taking too much time. But I think if you look at the special economic zone that we have in Senegal, you can get all the cotton produced in the West Africa country, all the maize and all the wheat produced in Tanzania and surrounding region in our special economic zone, process it, send it to Mauritius for final value addition and export back, and you have benefit. Mrs. Bulaki knows what I'm talking about. But we have these economic zones. How do we use them? So I'm going to go quickly on the opportunities that we have in terms of leveraging on the FTAs. I think the example itself highlights of how we should be working together in terms of these, in terms of the free trade agreement that we have signed. So FTAs give more market access, give more partnership with foreign investors. As businesses, we think we know it all, and we're always a family business. Father pass it to the son of the university, the son pass it to his son, and that's how it is. And very often the company dies down because there's no appetite for the third generation to take over. I think by opening your capital to foreign investors, you can bring in knowledge, you can bring market, you can bring know-how, and that is technology, and that is how you will grow. All small companies, all big companies started as a family business, but open capital. And also in terms of value chain, economy of scale, now you can produce more for bigger markets. In the past, you couldn't, but with FTAs, you can. And also you have more access to finance as well, because your market is bigger, opportunities are much, much bigger. And also in informal sectors, special thought for women-led businesses can operate more in these well-protected market, because women entrepreneurs find it very difficult to go up into the informal market because they are not, very often when it comes to finance, they are in a way cheated because when they send their goods, people don't pay them. I think that is an important point of doing business in well-protected markets and channels. These are some of the highlights of the FTA, if I have time. It covers, I think it's on the website, our website, but it's about tariff concession, it's about rules of origin, it's about trade facilitation, it's about non-tariff barriers, and so on and so forth. And it's about not just about goods, but it's about trades in services, but also about investment and movement of people. So tomorrow, you want to have your cashew production, you can bring people from India who are expert. Your diamond, for example, you get, to get a trained diamond polishers take about 5 years. And by the time you train here, it will take time. And you ask somebody, do you want to go get a job in diamond polishing? Say, what is that? But if you want to go towards the jewelry industry, you can get your raw material from Madagascar, you semi-cut it, you come here for polishing, you package it and export it to China, to expensive market. This is value addition. These are concrete examples how we can make it happen by having these FTAs. And also it's about economic cooperation. So the ecosystem of FTAs is also important. This is briefly on the China FTAs. It's about 7,000 lines of product. Again, the details are long enough. And it's about goods that you can enter, high-end goods. It's about services and exponential export potential in terms of ICT, electronics, and hardware. If you talk about service industry, we have a lot of accountants, we have a lot of engineers, we have a lot of people, doctors who are looking for jobs. But medical transcription, doing that service industry is a way to export. Architects, you don't have to be in Mozambique to design a building. You can design it here and export your draft. So I will stop here just to tell you that the sunrise industry is key for us to focus. There are sunset industries where no matter how much energy you will put, you will not succeed. But look at the sunrise industry. The sunrise industries are the blue economy, the fish processing. Today we are a big exporter of cod liver oil because in the tuna there's a lot of fish oil, but in the tuna's head, which is a waste, have a lot of oil. Pharmaceutical industry, cultural economy is also important. Blockchain, the green and circular economy, nutraceutical, economy of sports. We have one of the best climate for sports. And we have a good terrain, a lot of facilities in the country. And also ICT and digitalization in terms of opportunities. I can see Mr. Duman looking at me, so I'm going to stop here. I will take the rest in the panel discussion. I thank you for your attention. Have a great working session on this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf Ismail, for the perspective of the private sector on the manufacturing sector. You have mentioned a lot of important things which are really food for thought for the manufacturing sector and for further implementation, for further discussion also. Ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned in my presentation that local production has become again an important aspect or pillar of the economy, and today it is represented by the Association of Mauritian Manufacturers. I have the pleasure to welcome Mr. Bruno de Barry from IMM. He has 25 years been representing the interests of local manufacturers, in fact the AMM, and promoted the Mauritian producers and brands at large with its Made in Maurice label. Bruno holds a postgraduate master's in political and political communication at the University of Bordeaux, and after 7 years as coordinator and entrepreneur and lecturer within employers and organizations, Bruno joined the AMM in 2016. I have the pleasure to invite Bruno for his presentation.
Good morning to all of you. All protocol observed. Thank you, PS, for the Ministry of Industrial Development for organizing this event and the support of UNICA also. So I'll be very brief. As my colleague from the MCCI has already given an overview of the challenges of the manufacturing sector, I'll be rather focusing on maybe one area, which is the subsector of food industry, and how the manufacturing sector and the agricultural sector have common challenges that can be tackled in both ways. So we've seen the current situation. There are some global crises, and they tend to increase the vulnerability of our food system in Mauritius, and at the same time they call for more local production. The figures in 2015 would describe Mauritius as being a country where 55% of our local needs in food were satisfied by the local production, but when we looked at the independency of these local production, which is how much do they depend on the other countries in terms of raw materials, we had only half of this local production that was being satisfied by local raw materials. So this is why today we can say that only 25 or 30% of our needs are satisfied by a local production. So this is the main challenge, because we do have a lot of capacity here in Mauritius to produce and distribute, but we have so much dependency with foreign countries in terms of our raw materials and other inputs. So this is why, besides the fact that we have a quite vibrant local manufacturing sector, we still have some challenges. The most recent being oil production and other basic needs. So one would think that we just need to improve our local capacity of production and of storage, but in fact it's not sufficient. We need to make things different. I think my colleague from MCCI has already given some insights on how we should be doing things different in the sector itself. But in the subsector of food, there is definitely some re-engineering to do in terms of supply chain. I would just state one comment that was shared by the Financial Secretary here in Mauritius from the Ministry of of Finance and Economic Planning and Development. In preparation of the next budget, national budget, he shared this memo to colleagues, which is, I just took an extract, which is really highlighting that to tackle the current constraints on public funds, it is to accelerate the implementation of our import substitution strategy, and in particular in the production of renewable energy, food and manufactured goods. So it does show where the importance is being put in the coming years and coming months. And the question is, how do we do it? One personal observation I would add to it is that localism, which is quite a trendy term and does relate to a lot of economic operators, is not really an end game, but rather an entry point. Because the fact of putting a focus on localism is not solving structural challenges. And they tend to be overlooked. And this is why we may have a lot of programs, projects, fundings, budgetary measures, but in the changing process, we tend to overlook the structural challenges. So one of the structural challenge in both the manufacturing sector and the agricultural sector is that they're disconnected. In Mauritius, we produce a lot of vegetables and fruits, and we do have a vibrant manufacturing sector, but our sourcing is not being done essentially from our local production in terms of agriculture. So the problem statement would be, how do we get to a sustainable and inclusive food system in Mauritius? Sustainable because it's both in terms of economic perspective. Currently, our food system is not sustainable. It's quite vulnerable. In 2019, we imported about 40 billion rupees from 80 different countries. So it does show the span of exposure that we have in terms of dependency with countries that are essentially outside of the region itself of Indian Ocean. So this is the tremendous work that needs to be done. So it's also sustainability in terms of the impact on the environment. This is obviously one big challenge of many sectors, but it's also an opportunity for Mauritian products to be exported, new types of products to be developed. I think my colleague of MCCI just stated that what is our offer to foreign markets? What do we do differently? So this is where we do have a great deal of work to do, and it's in developing brands that are really sustainable in their whole process and their supply chain. And then inclusive, it's also about inclusiveness in terms of economic development. We do have a lot of families and people that are out of the economic system today in Mauritius, and if we're to revamp the food system, it needs to integrate that type of challenge also. So to that problem statement, we could have three objectives that are interlinked, in fact. The first is, how do we create a Mauritian sustainable farming model in Mauritius? I think that, like in many sectors, we have developed an ability to adapt existing models to Mauritius. But I think that in terms of sustainable farming, we still have a great deal of work to do. And this would be really interesting to interlock it with the second objective, which is, how do we increase the local value addition in the manufacturing sector, in the agri-food industry? Because you will understand that if we are to push for sustainable farming, we need to have a sustainable economic environment for that type of activities. And the manufacturing sector does have a great deal of responsibility to collaborate in creating that environment. And the last objective is linking also food solidarity and economic empowerment, because if we are to push, as we hear it, from a national budget to another, more on local production, and especially in agriculture activities, we need people to work. We need people to make that choice, to be trained, to take the risk, but to make these choices knowing that they do have an environment, they do have contract farming, they do have manufacturers that are, and tourism sector and other sectors that are engaged in buying out these outputs. This is how you create confidence and stability in the food system. So basically, how can it be done? I won't go into specifics. Maybe have the chance on the panel to go a little bit deeper with budget measures. But one thing is uniting stakeholders from public and private sectors and NGOs. I will go briefly on how to do it. The second is, how do you is how do you build the models for sustainable and inclusive agri-food chains. I think I've shared a couple of elements on it already. And the third one is really important, is before you get to the stage of policy, you need to experiment. You need to find the right model. So experimenting is really important to refine the models and in few years to be able to review our policies on tariff barriers, perhaps, because we do have some national priorities that have been really highlighted and tested on ground, and there is no risk, therefore, to put the right policy in front. Yes, on that first point, essentially, it's to take the initiative of pilot projects. In fact, my colleagues have already given a story of the manufacturing sector, but it's been alive for 50 years. So we do have a capacity to transform in Mauritius. We have a geographical identification, a national promotion label, which is the Made in Maurice for almost 10 years. So we do have an opportunity here to make a strategic shift for the Mauritius destination as a sourcing and investment destination. And it may be worked at three levels. It's at a territorial level, a subsector level, and mixing the three players, which are the private, public, and NGOs. So basically, the roles that would make the perfect recipe is in the private sector, starting from the manufacturing sector, as we are sharing the outputs, overview on the sector itself, would be the manufacturing sector to be able to share its cahier des charges, as we call them, its specifications regarding the products that they would like to source in Mauritius and the region, so as to guide the agricultural sector in choosing the right products to be developed in Mauritius, because we tend to overlook the aspect of the specific needs of manufacturing companies and believe that just because we would be growing a lot of tomatoes or potatoes, we could definitely be able to transform them here in Mauritius and be able to compete with foreign imported products such as French fries or tomatoes, purée de tomate. But the fact is that you need specific varieties of these products, and this is a risk that some players in the agricultural sector are maybe not are quite reluctant to take, because they don't have the guarantee in front of them to be sure that the manufacturing sector will source their products for 10 years with a stability of price and volume. So this question of how do you contract and how do you end up to interprofessional organizations starts with first in the private sector, the manufacturing sector needs to say, okay, for the next 10 years, I'll be in these families of products, I will be making this shift, so these are my specifications. And I will be supporting in the agricultural sector the players that wish to make that step forward. The public sector obviously is expected on the legal framework and the financial support, and I need to say that there is already a lot of support programs and financial support that is existing. The challenge is maybe how do you redirect this existing support programs on these sustainable farming practices so that we really support, financially speaking, the development of these new businesses. The NGOs, they today are consumers of these local products with subsidized prices, because we have some producers that are making the effort to cut down their benefits in order to support families. But in time, these beneficiaries could also be integrated into programs and capacity building and entrepreneurship in agriculture. So we would have something that is some sort of circularity on food security that could be interesting for our local brands. And this is the final slide. I think I'll have more time to come to it by the end of the day, but we need to prioritize, obviously, the sectors on which we could implement this value chain approach. and the easiest way to do it is obviously to focus on the subsectors where you have players that are ready to do that work. So we've made some surveys within our membership, and we've seen that in dairy products and in processed fruits and vegetables, let's say for juices or canned products, and even animal meat, there are we have some major players that are that have been looking for years how to operate this shift. So the question is, how do we put the right model to support them? At some point, the sectoral organizations that we are representing today will have also to give some space to other type of organizations that will need to come in the environment, which are interprofessional organizations, as we call them, but in fact they will be representing the agri-food chains themselves. It is really important for the public sector to have one stakeholder in front of them, which is speaking for the whole agri-food chain. I mean, representing the agriculturers, the manufacturers, the distributors. So you have a value chain approach, and this is how you can really have an impact in terms of policy making. And we might need some feasibility studies, obviously, on the choices that would be made. And it's also, to finish, it's also a question of regional cooperation. These questions, these projections that we're sharing are exactly the same questions and projections that are being done in the neighboring countries of the region. They all have the same challenges, and they are all seeking how, within their own territory and in the region, they can be more resilient and less dependent on the rest of the world. So this is why it's important to share that type of initiatives if they go forward from the very beginning with our partners in the region, so that we have a common stepping up on these future policies, let us hope, for the region. So thank you all, and glad to hear from you afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno, for this very interesting expose. I think food security is important to Mauritius and then many countries in the region as well. And the direction you are going, sustainability and inclusive food system, I think this is a very important, and this is a direction we should take. And we hope, we have seen many enterprises, members of the EMM, who have been able to raise their level of sustainability. We can say they have, many have reached international class in terms of sustainability. Thank you very much, Bruno. I think the next speaker is Mr. Dave Apalsami from NPCC. He has been with the NPCC, National Productivity Council, for since 2000, at the beginning of the NPCC, and he has, the NPCC itself has served the country. It's there, the objective of the NPCC is to serve better the economy and the society. Mr. Dave, in his capacity of Director Capacity Development Cooperatives, Corporation Services and Operations, acted also as former in charge of the NPCC from 2012 to 2018. He is a certified certified accountant and holds a postgraduate diploma in international business. I have the pleasure now to invite Mr. Dave for his presentation.
Well, thank you, Dr. Duman. All protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. A big thanks to Permanent Secretary and the team, as well as UNICA, for organizing this policy dialogue and for giving us the opportunity to make this presentation. Okay, the presentation is about boosting productivity of manufacturing enterprises, which we are going to look at from the perspective of the productivity study report from the World Bank. Already, since this morning, we have had several solutions for the manufacturing sector from Dr. Duman, who is also a council member of the NPCC, my good friend Dr. Ismail from the MCCI, and also Mr. Bruno Davari from the Made in Maurice, CEO of Made in Maurice. But I look forward that the findings of this report will be insightful for the public and private sector to work together and come up with solutions for the manufacturing sector and of course for other sectors also. Okay, so the contents of the productivity, the contents of the presentation, I think it's good to start from the beginning. So it calls for an understanding of productivity, and productivity is a very simply put out, it's outputs over input, and improving productivity means getting the most of for the least put in. Right? It is important for companies, for nations, and for regions, as it is a major determinant of national competitiveness. Okay, and improving productivity is, in a way, how we increase the size of the cake. Without increasing the size of the cake, we normally end up trying to discuss about the shares, the slices. But with productivity improvement, it enables wage gains to occur without producing inflation. Therefore, productivity is essential to an economy's ability to create real wealth. Okay. Assuming there is shared, equitable distribution of wealth, a 3% rise in productivity means the standard of living doubles every 22 years. That is, each generation is able to live twice better than their parents. Outputs and over inputs is fine, but we also have negative outputs. Okay. In an interconnected global context, people are more aware about environmental damage, depletion of natural resources, and often there's also widening of societal gaps. And these outcomes may be challenging to what we call the realized value of productive activity. Okay, so this is where it becomes important to learn, as we say, learning to see. Okay, productivity has several dimensions. The 3-dimension main important is social, economic, and environmental productivity. And these were coined as the triple bottom line in the 90s. And to be sustainable in the longer term, it is important that companies and nations improve all of social, economic, and environmental productivity, so the operations is socially equitable, economically viable, and environmentally bearable. Now, this is a definition of productivity, 1958, definition of productivity by the European Productivity Agency, and which has been modified by the Japan Productivity Center, and which in a way encompasses the 3 dimensions of productivity. So productivity is above all an attitude of mind. It seeks to continuously improve what already exists. It is based on the conviction that one can do things better today than yesterday, and better tomorrow than today for a better quality of life. But above all, productivity is a means to an end, the end being that every citizen, in the case of Mauritius, every Mauritian should be better off tomorrow from where we are today. Now, this definition of productivity was elaborated by 60 members of the National Trade Union Congress in 2000, July 2000. We had just started operations. There was a brainstorming session facilitated by the then Executive Director, Nikhil. He was the founding Executive Director of the NPCC. And the definition is productivity is a process of continuous improvement in the production supply of quality output service through efficient, effective use of inputs with emphasis on teamwork for the betterment of all. So the important thing about this definition is that when we started working with the trade unions at the beginning of the session, they had different views of productivity. And just to share with you, one of the trade unions, when we asked him, what is productivity for you? So he said it was in Creole, bœuf travail, cheval manger. That was his definition of productivity. But in the end, at the end of the session, we come up with this shared definition by all of them of productivity. So in a way to say that productivity should not be imposed. It has, we have to convince. We have to convince people about the need of productivity, and then every stakeholder has to work together towards a common goal, whether it is in the enterprise or at national level in the country or even global level. Now, I think I'm going to skip these figures about growth, etc., global growth. I'm sure everybody is already aware about it, and Dr. Smeyer also talked about it in his presentation earlier this morning. Okay, so this is important, this part about the labor productivity and capital productivity and multi-factor productivity. So you see that they are all declining. Labor productivity, I believe, has declined from the figures here in 2020. There's a decline of 9.7%. There was an initial increase of 1.6% in 2019 and a decline of 9.7%. The same thing for capital productivity, 15.5% decline in 2020. There was an initial contraction of 0.3% in 2019. And multi-factor productivity is also following the same trend. And multi-factor productivity is of utmost importance. It's more important than labor and capital productivity because it takes into account all the other dimensions such as teamwork, managerial practices, etc., which is not taken into labor productivity and capital productivity. Okay, so I'm going to move fast because of time constraint. Okay, this is also important. The figures is indicators for the manufacturing sector, national indicators from Statistics Mauritius. We can see, and Dr. Ismail mentioned about the importance of the manufacturing in terms of GDP. Now we see in terms of output, the contraction in 2020 is minus 17.8. So if we took that whole part and we take out this minus 17, it is a big chunk of our GDP. And you see the average for 2010 to 2020 is minus 0.7%. Now we look at labor productivity, an annual average growth of 0.6%, but there's a negative 12.5 decrease in 2020. Capital productivity, 13.6% decrease in 2020, and multi-factor productivity, minus 12.8%. And we look at unit labor costs for the manufacturing sector in Mauritian rupee. So there has been an annual average increase for the 10 years, 2.4%, but for 2020, we see that it is 7.3% unit labor cost. And USD, it's minus 0.24%. So these figures nous interpellent, I will say, and we need to take into consideration what has to be done. Okay, this is about the international comparison of unit labor costs in manufacturing for 2028. And you can see that the largest increase is in the UK, around 4.6%, and lowest is 0.2% in USA. And for Mauritius, we registered an increase of 2% in unit labor costs. Okay, now in terms of the hourly labor costs, highest in Germany and lowest is in Philippines. And for Mauritius, in 2.92 USD compared to 3.17 USD in 2019. And this hourly labor cost is a very important element of national competitiveness. Okay, now the main findings of the report. Okay, the report has 3 chapters, 3 important chapters. The first one is about the productivity trends by sector. Second chapter is about the business enabling environment for productivity, and the third chapter is about the skill gaps and other labor market determinants. Okay, and the methodology used by the World Bank is about the enterprise survey that is being carried out in around 140 countries to allow benchmarking among the the countries. And there was a brainstorming session prior to the survey here in Mauritius, and additional questions were added for Mauritius in the Mauritian context. Okay, that's in terms of sampling, we had 732 firms that participated in the survey. And in terms of sizes, we see 405 small enterprises, 237 medium, and 90 large enterprises. Manufacturing sector, we have food production 41, textile and garments 28, and other manufacturing is 103, and the rest are services. Now, we all know that Mauritius has been going, for the past decades, we have had a story of growth and structural transformation, but in recent years, growth has flattened and even declined. And Mauritian firms continue to trail behind their high-income competitors on important productivity measures in key sectors. Okay, we have a labor cost share similar to high-income economies, while our productivity closely resembles upper middle-income economies, so there's a mismatch here. So this indicates that the importance of bolstering skills and adopting technological improvements. Okay. Now, in the manufacturing sector, appears to remain on a flat or declining trajectory, and this complements the figures of Statistic Mauritius in terms of value added. The food manufacturing sector stands out both in terms of productivity growth and investment, but it remains characterized by low value added goods, a correspondingly low labor cost share, and low penetration of foreign investment. Okay, in terms of business environment, the perceptions on several aspects of business environment have improved since the last survey in 2009. And this includes infrastructure, transportation, crime, corruption, etc. But access to finance is the most commonly cited major constraint, which has been identified by 40% of businesses, and with highest concentration in terms of younger, smaller firms, and in sectors including garment manufacturing. Yes, okay. Now, the business environment is again characterized by widespread informal competition, which is particularly acute for about 10% of registered firms. They reported that unregistered businesses are the primary source of competition. Okay, this level is higher than what is found in other high-income economies, and this closely matches data that was gathered in the 2009 survey. Okay, so in Mauritius also, the informality is concentrated in construction, transportation, and food sectors. Okay, so in terms of innovation, business in Mauritius are bringing new products to the markets at a higher rate of 42% compared to other high-income economies, where it is 38%, and to sub-Saharan Africa, where it is 40%. But out of the 42% Mauritian businesses that have introduced new product or service, only about a little more than 50% are bringing new to the markets products, compared to 64% of products and services introduced in other high-income economies and 71% in African economies. Okay. And the process innovations, we all know that process innovation is indicative of technological progression in any enterprises. But only 17% of Mauritian businesses have introduced process innovation, compared to 25% of firms in high-income economies and 33% in African economies. And only 9% of Mauritian businesses spend money on research and development, compared to 14% in high-income economies and 16% in African economies. Okay. Now, in terms of skills, we know that the ability of a company to utilize and develop new technologies and processes depends on the skills, largely dependent on the level of education of its workforce. But 53.2% of enterprises in the textile and garment sector reported that inadequately educated workers are an obstacle to the operations. And the data show that 31.9% of workers of this sector have completed secondary education and only 15.4% have a degree. Okay, so these education level are below the values seen for other sectors, especially in service-oriented firms. So a lack of formal education is an obstacle to enterprises to upgrade their production processes and improve productivity and competitiveness. Okay. So the survey provides measures of firm skills across the 8 dimensions, but of course the types of skill required by firm depends on their business model. And a particularly salient finding is that a high proportion of firms emphasize the need for proficient or advanced interpersonal skills, 58.7%, work ethics, 66.6%, socio-emotional skills are important, we know, for many businesses, together with problem-solving skills, 62.9%, and job-specific technical skills, 62.7%. In terms of skill gaps, 90% of firms rated the level of current skill in the establishment as sufficient or higher. But 2 important exceptions, or a bit surprisingly, English language and also basic IT skills, where around 20% of firms responded that their general requirements were not met by their workforce. And this suggests that these skills might be in short supply. In terms of vacancies, across the 7 general occupational categories, around 75% of vacancies are filled, which suggests that there is generally reasonable supply of these type of workers. And the main exception is the skilled manual workers category, where less than 9% of vacancies are filled. Also, for plant and machine operators and technicians and associate professionals, the rates are 71% and 71.2%. That firms suggest that it is challenging to fill vacancies in the middle skilled professionals. In terms of scarcity, Mauritians are less inclined to work as skilled manual laborers. Firms therefore fill these vacancies with expats working on time-bound permits. And 20.8% of firms stated that they had recourse to foreign labor during the survey period. And textile and garments were by far the most foreign labor extensive one. Okay. Now, skills level, we know strong determinants of wages. And on average, the ICT paid the highest salaries to skilled workers and also to those considered semi-skilled. Wholesale and auto sales are the second highest monthly wages for skilled workers. And higher wages indicate that firms need higher order skills and need to remunerate accordingly. So existing competition raises the cost to retain existing talent. And the textile and garment sector pays the lowest wages across all skill levels. And they also struggles to attract skilled workers. And then in the medium to long term, paying higher wages in exchange for more skilled workers will definitely benefit firms. In terms of training, 19% of firms provide the training, and the primary focus of formal training was job-specific technical trainings. Most small firms do not train their employees formally, and if they do so, they do not spend any significant amount on this, so they believe that it should be publicly provided. Now, in terms of female workforce, the female participation in the economy, in the labor market, is hampered by lack of support mechanism, but they represent a reserve of talent which we are not making use of. Now, in terms of policy recommendation, to continue to drive productivity growth, we should focus on opening cross-sectoral support linkages, supporting broad investment in education programs that prepare people for work. Manufacturing sector should consider increasing research and development expenditure, and these steps will improve international competitiveness. Okay. Skills are closely linked with higher labor productivity and important for transformation of business. And TVET, Polytechnic, secondary and tertiary education institutions should emphasize on digital and computational skills. Efforts to improve skill supply should consider industry-specific needs, and manufacturing sector tend to look for skill sets that are specifically linked to their productive activities, but service-oriented sectors, they look for general skills such as cognitive, which is important for creativity and innovation. Now, in terms of innovation, even though innovation have had a low uptake in our economy, even though it is associated with productivity gains, and improving and the targeting and uptake of these programs may help bend the curve on innovation. We have spent a lot of money on these types of programs, but the uptake has been quite low. Okay. So as a recommendation, textile and garments and other manufacturing sectors, focus sectors should, as far as possible, increase the level of computer and general IT skills, either through recruitment or training, to provide a basis for increased automation and digitalization. And given the importance of digital skills for labor productivity and technological upgrading and development, it is a key area where policy should step in to provide training as early as the primary school level, complemented with a national digital proficiency program. Foreign workers is a short-term solution to skill shortages, but in the long term, it will be, we need to look for domestic alternatives, and integrating women in the economy will be important. And the set of support mechanisms to mainstreaming women's labor market participation must be strengthened through a joint effort of public and private sector. Okay, training programs are underutilized. Okay, I'll move fast because of time's constraint, but I almost the end. And to deliver potential benefits, programs should be reorganized and targeted to the needs of firms. And skill-based and training needs should be geared towards improving productivity. Right, so in terms of NPCC, what we are doing, so our strategic plan 2021-2025, we have these 4 objectives about development of a productivity mindset, building productive and competitive enterprises, and enhancing public sector productivity, as well as contributing to evidence-based policy making. Looking forward to renew the collaboration with the World Bank for this report. And under our enterprise transformation program, we have 4 projects to support the manufacturing sector and other sectors. It's about the enterprise productivity solution, National Productivity and Quality Excellence Award, capacity building program, which we are doing, and the Enterprise Go Digital, which has just been launched. I think time's constraint, I had to move a bit fast, and thank you very much for your attention. I'll be available for any questions if you have.
Thank you, Dave, for these interesting indicators. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll skip the Q&A session for the time being. We'll have it later on. Honorable Sunil Dadbula, Minister of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives. Mrs. Fatma Abdul Rahman Ahmed, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperative, Industrial Development Division. Ms. Isatu Gai, Chief Sub-Regional Initiative Section, UNECA Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa. Mr. Robert Panamwana, Office of the United Nations Resident Coordinator. His Excellency, Mr. Vincent de Guerre, Ambassador of European Union of Mauritius. Representatives of public and private sector organizations, captains of industry, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Again, good morning. The Ministry of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives, Industrial Development Division, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa, welcome you all to this national policy dialogue on manufacturing, on the Mauritian manufacturing sector. This policy dialogue is indeed an important event, as it serves as a platform to reflect on the present situation of the Mauritian manufacturing sector and will help to identify future courses of action for the sector. To start with, I'll call upon Mrs. Fatma Abdul Rahman Ahmed, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Industrial Development, the Industrial Development Division, for her welcome address. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you, Dr. Duman. Honorable Sumildad Bula, Minister of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives. Your Excellency, Mr. Vincent de Geer, Ambassador of the European Union to Mauritius. Mrs. Issa Tougaï, Chief Sub-Regional Initiative Section, UNECA, SROSA. Mr. Robert Banam Wana, UN Resident Coordinator's Office to Mauritius and Seychelles. Mrs. Bineshwari Bulaki, Economic Affairs Officer, UNECA. Representatives of UNECA, my colleague and staff, member of staff, representatives of the private sector, captains of the industry, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning, nearly morning to ending to you all. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you to this National Policy Dialogue on the manufacturing sector. Let me at the outset seize this opportunity to express my heartfelt thanks to our partner, UNECA, for its unwavering support and collaboration towards making this event possible. I also wish to thank the Honorable Minister for his continuous commitment, dedication and support towards the industrial development agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are all aware, the current pandemic has brought in its wake numerous challenges. As a small and remote island state, Mauritius had to face the brunt of external shocks, which have been compounded by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Government took prompt and timely measures to ensure that our enterprises maintain their operations and do not lay off employees. In this testing time, most of our enterprises have proved that they have a resilient and versatile mettle and have survived against all adversities by adapting to an evolving market demand. Our manufacturers ensured a stable source of supply of essential goods. They have also improvised to produce items of sanitary importance, such as personal and protective equipment, hand sanitizers, face masks and shields, to cater to the immediate needs of the country. The performance of our manufacturing sector is indeed truly commendable. Let me emphasize that with more than 50 years of industrialization, our manufacturing sector has been and is still the main driver for economic growth and development. Okay. However, we cannot afford to sit back on our laurels, and we need to continuously improve and innovate. This can only be achieved through the sustained collaboration with all our stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, the National Policy Dialogue on the manufacturing sector is therefore very timely. We are gathered today for a round of consultations with our key stakeholders to come up with proposals to pave the way for a transformational shift in the manufacturing sector. Undeniably, the pandemic has acted as a wake-up call for manufacturers to change their business strategies and optimize the adoption of advanced technology, particularly those associated with Industry 4.0. Looking ahead, it is imperative to keep up with the pace of change by enhancing our industrial readiness and capability. Likewise, innovation, digitalization, and productivity are key enablers for our enterprises to remain competitive. Previously, during this event, we had the opportunity to take stock of the progress made in the implementation of the industrial policy and strategic plan. We heard the private sector perspectives on the manufacturing sector, how to stimulate local production and boost productivity of manufacturing enterprises. In the afternoon, we will listen to UNECA's presentation of National African Continental Free Trade Area response strategy of Mauritius. As we know, the AFCFTA has been touted as an economic game changer to bolster intra-Africa trade. There is general optimism that it has the potential to significantly transform the African economies and to build back in the wake of COVID-19. This augurs well with our discussions of today. Thereafter, a high-level brainstorming session will follow to discuss on the future of the manufacturing sector. I hope that together we will be able to come up with concrete proposals to further sustain the future development of the manufacturing sector. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all join forces to spur advancement towards a transformed and sustainable manufacturing sector capable to withstand exogenous shocks and remain globally competitive. Allow me to end on this quote by Henry Ford, famous American industrialist and founder of Ford Motor Company. I quote, "Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success." Unquote. On this note, I would like to thank you all for your kind attention.
Mr. Moderator, I am reading this speech on behalf of the Director of the ECA Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa, Ms. Eunice Kamwendo, who would have liked to be here with us, but unfortunately could not due to the exigencies of the service. Honorable Sumildut Bola, Minister of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives of the Republic of Mauritius, Your Excellency, Mr. Vincent Degard, Ambassador of the European Union Delegation to Mauritius, Mr. Robert Banamwana, Head of the United Nations Resident Coordinator's Office, Mauritius and the Seychelles, Mrs. Bibi Fatwa, Abdul Rahman Ahmed, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives, distinguished senior government officials of the Republic of Mauritius, distinguished representatives of the private sector, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, Dr. Vera Songwe, and on my own behalf, I wish to extend a warm welcome to you all at this National Policy Dialogue on the manufacturing sector of Mauritius. I wish also to express the Commission's profound appreciation to the Ministry of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives, and to the Government of Mauritius as a whole for the opportunity to collaborate on such an important initiative and at such a critical time of our development landscape. Honorable Minister, only last month, your ministry and the ECA Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa, in collaboration with the SADC Business Council, held a seminar on the margins of the Dubai Expo 2020 on the theme, Impact of COVID-19 on Micro, Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, MSMEs, in Southern Africa, with the afternoon session devoted to the topic, Enhancing the Resilience of the Manufacturing Sector in Mauritius in the post-COVID-19 era. We are honored to be here today in Mauritius, your home country, to continue the public-private dialogue we started in Dubai. This two-day national policy dialogue on manufacturing in Mauritius, among others, aims to sensitize the Mauritian business sector and development partners on the policies and strategies put in place by your ministry under your able leadership to to support the manufacturing sector in Mauritius as the world continues to contend with the COVID-19 pandemic and braces for the fallout of a war in Europe. The National Policy Dialogue also aims to stimulate timely reflections on the future of the manufacturing sector in a bid to better understand the emerging challenges and take advantage of new opportunities now and in the near future. Ladies and gentlemen, Mauritius as a small island developing state and as a sub-Saharan African country has come a long way over the last 40 years. The notable success it has registered on economic diversification and development has positioned the country among the ranks of high-income countries, which has been hailed as a stellar example to follow the world over. It is undeniable that the manufacturing sector, particularly textile and apparel, was at the heart of the Mauritian economic miracle and its economic takeoff in the 1980s. The establishment of special economic zones, propelled initially by foreign direct investment and backed at the national level by duty-free entitlements, tax breaks, cheap local labor, supportive state institutions and at a global level by the multi-fiber agreement, provided a recipe for economic and industrial success. The manufacturing sector in Mauritius, at its height in 1998, accounted for 21% of the island's gross domestic product, compared to 10.7% in 2020. Manufacturing value added grew at double-digit rates over several years in the 1980s. During the period 2014 to 2019, however, its growth rate averaged only 0.8% per annum. No doubt, these figures indicate that Mauritian manufacturing sector has reached a crossroads and needs to embark on a new journey of higher productivity growth, matched by high-end and high-quality production to attract new segments of the customer market in hitherto unexplored niches. The textile and apparel sector has always been dominant in the Mauritian manufacturing landscape. In the 1980s, it accounted for the bulk of jobs created in the manufacturing sector and most of the country's merchandise exports. While today, this is still the case, the textile and apparel industry has been plagued by loss of competitiveness on the global scene due to rising labor costs, skills shortages, declining multi-factor productivity, the rise of new competitors in Southeast Asia, and developments on trade liberalization and globalization fronts. Some of these factors have been highlighted and discussed in the joint study that was published in December 2020 by the ECA Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa and the United Nations Development Programme in Mauritius. One of the key recommendations of the study was to foster the uptake of technology and innovation in the manufacturing sector. The study advocates for companies to invest in soft robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence, as well as in greener products to reduce the environmental impacts of manufacturing on the country's fragile ecosystem. Honorable Minister, we are aware that you are a champion of technology and innovation for the Mauritian manufacturing industry, and we at ECA look forward to accompanying your ministry on this exciting journey of transforming the Mauritian manufacturing landscape in the new digital age. Ladies and gentlemen, times have changed. The world has changed. And so has the fortunes of the Mauritian manufacturing sector and the jewel in its crown, the textile and apparel subsector. While it is true that challenges have emerged over the last 20 years in the form of economic slowdowns, health-related pandemics, increased competition from emerging economies, amid heightened vulnerabilities to climate change, opportunities are also emerging. The ability of the Mauritian manufacturing sector to harness these opportunities will shape its future and may ultimately determine its fate. One such opportunity I have already mentioned relates to technology and innovation, and associated with it, the ability of Mauritian companies to ride the digital wave and embrace Industry 4.0. Another opportunity lies in tapping new markets and better utilizing existing and new trade agreements Mauritius has signed onto, including the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, the China-Mauritius Free Trade Agreement, and the India-Mauritius Comprehensive Economic Cooperation and Partnership Agreement. Leveraging trade to advance industrial development and sophistication is not a new idea, but needs to be demonstrated in practice. At the ECA Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa, we believe that trade and industrialization are two sides of the same development coin. This implies that countries need to harness the linkages between their trade and industrial policies for coherent and synergistic implementation. It has become imperative for the Mauritian manufacturing sector to seek new sources of productivity growth and embark on a new dynamic path of expansion. The role that bilateral and multilateral trade agreements that Mauritius is a party to should play in this process merits serious attention. Ladies and gentlemen, on Friday, 25th March, Mauritius will validate its African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, response strategy. This will be a significant day for Mauritius and its development partners. The AFCFTA can be an opportunity for the country's manufacturing sector to leapfrog to a new high productivity growth path. The Continental Free Trade Area can unleash possibilities for Mauritius to position itself as a manufacturing hub in Southern Africa, facilitating the process of industrial intermediates for the assembly of made-in-Africa manufactured products. Further, it can open up possibilities for Mauritian SMEs to integrate into African-driven regional industrial value chains. For these possibilities to be translated into economic realities will necessitate a rethink of existing export strategies on the part of all stakeholders, public and private. The integration of an African strategy in the business plans of Mauritian firms should be an objective to aim for and may necessitate new types of support from the government. This brings me to my final point, which relates to effective state-business relations. As we all know, ultimately, the private sector will constitute the major force in the effective implementation of government's trade and industrial policies. No benefits can accrue from any trade or investment agreement negotiated by governments if ultimately the private sector and its businesses are not equipped to take advantage of these agreements. The state working hand in hand with the private sector, offering them a space to provide feedback on what works and what does not work in terms of government support, and involving them in the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of trade and industrial policies should be considered a priority. In concluding, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to thank the European Union for its financial support to the AFCFTA process channeled through ECA, which has made it possible for the Commission to provide technical support to African governments, including the government of Mauritius, in the elaboration of their national AFCFTA strategies. We count on the continued collaboration and support of the Union as Africa embarks on the important next phase of this journey, implementation. I wish you successful deliberations and look forward to the outcomes of the national dialogue. Quote and I thank you all. Quote and quote.
Thank you, Ms. Isatogei, for mentioning the close collaboration of the ministry and UNICA, and for giving us the opportunity to bring this collaboration to new heights. And thank you also for your good work in Mauritius. Ladies and gentlemen, the UN with its agencies all around the world, all around the globe, is considered to be the world's largest international organization caring for the welfare of the global population. Its contribution in Mauritius is impressive as well. I will now call upon Mr. Robert Panamwana, Office of the United Nations Residence of Coordinator, to deliver his address. Mr. Robert.
Your Excellency, Minister Smolduth Bola, Minister of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives in Mauritius, Your Excellency, Mr. Vincent Deger, Ambassador of European Union Delegation in Mauritius, Madame Bibi Fatwa Abdul Rahman Ahmed, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives, Madame Isatogei, Chief of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, Sub-Regional Office for Southern Africa, distinguished senior government officials of the Republic of Mauritius, distinguished members of the private sector and civil society, UN colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, bonjour ou bon après-midi. It is my pleasure to welcome you today on behalf of the Resident Coordinator, Mrs. Christine Omutoni, who is not in the country, and the United Nations in Mauritius, to this national policy dialogue on manufacturing sector in Mauritius, an important timely event convened by the Ministry of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives of Mauritius and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. I wish to congratulate both the Ministry and the UNECA for this excellent initiative at this time when Mauritius is aiming to consolidate its position as a high-income country amidst of difficult and challenging conditions on the global scene. The UN resident coordinators, the UN office role in Mauritius is to help coordinate the work of all UN agencies that provide support to Mauritius and also facilitate support from United Nations to the government of Mauritius. There are 19 UN agencies that have interventions and activities to support development agenda of the government of Mauritius. Some of them do not have a physical presence in the country, but like UNECA, like the United Nations Industrial Organization, UNIDO, that even without having a physical presence in the country, still are covering a broader range thematic area of work ranging from public health to local economic development, environmental sustainability, industrialization, food security, social protection, and human rights. As we meet today in challenging times, right as Mauritius has started to emerge from the hardship imposed by COVID-19 pandemic, as you all know, a military conflict in Ukraine is sending tremors in the global market, strongly affecting the commodity and food prices across the globe. As a small island developing state dependent on imports and commodities, Mauritius remains highly vulnerable to vagaries and international environment and will unfortunately bear some costs of the current global turmoil. Building self-sufficiency and reducing exposure to vulnerability induced by global environment remain very important for Mauritius. Ladies and gentlemen, as you might be aware, the collaboration between the government of Mauritius and UN entities is framed in the so-called, is guided in the so-called the Strategic Partnership Framework 2019 and 2023 between the UN and the government of Mauritius with regard to manufacturing. I would like to highlight that this partnership has already planned to work on sustainable job creation and economic growth, and also to work on inclusive prosperity with emphasis on reducing vulnerability of Mauritius to risk from poverty, climate, food insecurity, inequality, and discrimination, which encompasses challenges going beyond the sheer economic realities. The UN has subscribed to continue tackling these issues globally, notably under the SDG framework. Here as well, vibrant and green manufacturing can be part of the solution, helping to alleviate poverty and inequality, tackle food insecurity, and to create promising opportunity for the island whilst addressing the impact of climate change. The strategic partnership framework emphasizes 6 areas of where alignment with national vision is particularly pronounced. Let me look into greater details at first, one of which is manufacturing constitutes a key component. National vision, strong economy, manufacturing, SMEs, agriculture and financial services, and gender equality features transformed business as its key outcome. One of the key performance indicators for this priority is annual increase of manufacturing by 3%. This priority area requires the manufacturing to go hand in hand with support from micro, small, and medium enterprises, simply because a large share of firms, over 80%, are classified as micro, small, and medium enterprises in Mauritius. This is not unlike in other countries of the region. Therefore, policy and financing measures supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises are likely to also have an overall positive effect on the manufacturing sector. Work in partnership with the UN system should lead to promotion of innovation, increased productivity in targeted traditional and new sectors. Innovation in manufacturing sector means both moving towards more efficient manufacturing methods and increased production for more advanced goods. The manufacturing sector, including micro, small, and medium enterprise, is one of the key engines of economic growth in Mauritius. The Mauritian manufacturing sector contributes at least 13% of the national gross value added and employs 16% of the labor force. The textile remains dominating subsector. Despite growing international competition, there are opportunities to introduce new and more efficient production processes using renewable fibers under the Sustainable Mauritius brand. Production of other value-added products such as medical devices, watch parts, and diamond polishing is growing. What is the UN support and offer for this sector? Various UN agencies have been closely involved in supporting the manufacturing sector in Mauritius. Among others, the United Nations Conference for Trade and Development, UNCTAD, supported the development of industrial policy strategic plan for Mauritius. This policy is in line with the ambitious target of the National Vision 2030, and its objective includes an increase of the manufacturing gross value added from 1.6 billion in 2018 to 3.6 billion. The growth of manufacturing at compound annual growth rate of 6.7% from 2018 to 2030 to ensure it contributes 25% of the GDP. The improvement of the sector productivity by annual of 4% to sustain the economy's structural transformation in the high income status and increase the manufacturing employment from 103,000 in 2018 to 146,000 in 2022. The progress toward this objective would be guided by the overall vision of pursuing continuous innovation, technology, upgrading, productivity gains, and highly skilled employment. All these are important visions and great opportunity for partnership between the UN and the government of Mauritius. Let me talk about key challenges and opportunities looking forward. Distinguished participant, manufacturing sector needs to maintain its resilience in the age of value chain unreliability, geopolitical volatility, and fluctuations of supply of commodities and key components for manufacturers' goods. Moreover, the impact of climate change is growing in importance, and therefore, the development of manufacturing sector needs to integrate close attention to the implication of industrial activity for environment. Let me say some anecdotes. This one is not in the speech. Those who write the speech will not find this. The link between the industrialization and climate change is vital. My grandmother used to tell me when she sent me to find wood to cook food, she used to tell me, go cut the wood, but don't sit on the branch you are cutting, because then you will be dead before bringing the what we need to cook food. So it's sometimes just as simple as that. This planet, for us to do industrialization, we need a healthy planet. Without a healthy planet, it is going to be very challenging. It's even an existential threat for humanity. And the reality, the consequences of climate change, it's not they are coming, they are here already for the entire humanity. So that the impact of climate change needs to be taken care of as we think about industrialization. So one of the mitigating factors and actions for this, in Mauritius, manufacturing has played an important role in the structural transformation of the economy. It is therefore also safe to say that manufacturing is one of the main energy-consuming sector, accounting for 20% of the energy consumed in Mauritius. Although energy productivity has increased, additional improvement could be made by reducing waste in industrial processes. As a matter of fact, according to the World Risk Report, Mauritius is the 10th most exposed country to natural disasters and 19th in terms of risk due to the state of preparedness. And according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the 3rd country in terms of most threatened plant species. You might agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, that green economy transitions offers Mauritius further opportunity for sustained economic growth, energy and water savings, increased agriculture productivity, and green job. The focus should be on achieving a resilient, inclusive, and sustainable growth based on a cleaner, sustainable, low emission, and climate change development. And this is in line with the target fixed in the master plan for the environment for Mauritius 2030. Here again, I remember a wise advice from a wise man when I was still young. You can choose your actions, but you can never choose the consequences. So if we choose to destroy the planet today, the planet will not give us a luxury to choose the consequences. So, as I conclude, at this juncture, it is important for Mauritius to pursue with dedication its ambitious development agenda, ensuring that the manufacturing sector assumes its proper role and an increasing role in the overall economic agenda of Mauritius. We as the UN stand ready to provide support on how best to integrate new technology, digitalization and greening in both the industry and micro and small and medium enterprise sector involved in the manufacturing of goods. Thank you, and I wish you fruitful deliberations.
Thank you, Mr. Robert, for highlighting the long collaboration between Mauritius and the UN, the special interest of the UN for manufacturing, and for indicating that we need to develop the resilience of the manufacturing sector. Ladies and gentlemen, the European Union has been a privileged partner in the socio-economic transformation of Mauritius, having realized many projects in the country. I have now the pleasure to invite His Excellency Mr. Vincent de Guerre, Ambassador of European Union to Mauritius, for his address.
Merci beaucoup. Good morning to everyone. Honorable Simuldet Bola, Minister of Industrial Development, SME and Cooperatives, Mrs. Issatou Gaye, Chief Sub-Regional Initiative Section of UNECA, Mrs. Bibi Fatma Abdul Rahman Ahmed, Permanent Secretary, Mr. Robert Balamwona, Strategic Planning and Team Leader from the United Nations Resident Coordinator's Office, Mr. Ramin Rampersad, Chief Executive Officer, SME Mauritius, Mr. Kevin Ramkalawan, Chief Executive Officer of the Business Mauritius, Mr. Guillaume Huguenin, President of the Mauritian Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. Youssouf Ismail, Secretary General, Mrs. Liloti Joseri, Secretary General of MEXA, and Mr. Bruno Dubarry, Chief Executive Officer, Association of Mauritian Manufacturers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants. First of all, on behalf of the European Union, I would like to thank the Mauritian authorities for their unwavering support and for their consistent vote in the United Nations to call for the suspension of hostilities in Ukraine and the respect of international rules, including basic humanitarian principles. During the coronavirus pandemic, the world needed for 2 years to cooperate and to work together to conceive, produce and distribute vaccine and to keep all of our economies afloat. While the virus is still around us, we now need to strongly defend our universal principles and values and to anticipate the huge economic disturbances that this unprovoked and unjustified war will create and the risk of shortages of basic food, notably for millions of people in both the southern and the northern hemispheres. Russia bears full responsibility for this unprecedented situation. Because, and within this dark context, full of challenging perspective, your policy dialogue comes today at a critical moment. It is therefore a real honor and a pleasure for me to be here today for this assise of the industrial policy and strategic plan for the manufacturing sector in Mauritius. Maybe I take off the mask, if I may. Thank you. This gathering acts as a follow-up to the launch of the strategic plan that took place on the 4th of December 2020. The strategic plan was formulated more than a year ago with the technical and financial support of the United Nations, which I thank very much for their cooperation. But as I just pointed out, the world has gone through major transformations since, and it is therefore very important to take stock of these changes and to see how they potentially influence the initial plan. Several elements remain, however, constant. Among them, one which is essential for the European Union is that the European Union has in fact has been and remains the main trading partner and investment partner for Mauritius. The EU represents in 2020 some 24.7% of Mauritian trade, 33% of export and 21% of imports, while in the second place, China lies at 12.6%, the United Arab Emirates at 9%, South Africa at 8.8%, and India at 7.6% of the total trade for Mauritius. The EU is therefore actively engaging and working with the public and private sector, committed to continue to share our expertise and experience to consolidate this long-lasting and strong partnership. After 1 year of implementation, the Ministry has deemed it necessary to have a thorough reflection on the vision, on the 22 recommendations and several sectoral actions stated in the strategic plan. Such a reflection is necessary, as I just mentioned, given the new challenges under which the manufacturing sector is operating today, and to assess whether, in the context of the dynamics of the global scene, there is a need for other recommendations for a sustained and inclusive growth in the manufacturing sector. Let me touch here on 4 core issues of importance for the EU, namely, first of all, the trade agreements, secondly, the transformation of the manufacturing industry, third, the need for equipping people with the right skills, and finally, how the enabling and consolidating environment for a business-friendly Mauritius. Let me start with the trade agreements. As an open economy that has developed impressively over the last few decades based on free trade agreements and the ease of doing business, Mauritius has embraced participation in the global value chain. This policy approach has served the economy exceptionally well, with duty-free access to the European Union market under the Economic and Partnership Agreement, which is key to the success of Mauritius. Mauritius' participation in the global value chain has clearly supported the development of its manufacturing sector. Free trade agreements and economic partnership agreements have also permitted access to large markets and allowed Mauritian manufacturers to scale up their activities based on their defined areas of comparative as well as competitive advantages. It is also interesting to note that Mauritius trade with the sub-Saharan Africa markets, in particular with SADC and COMESA region, has witnessed a substantial increase. This trend clearly reveals a shift towards participation in regional value chains, which will be reinforced with the application of the African Continental Free Trade Area, but also with the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement with India and the Mauritius-China Free Trade Area. One of the value chain is the cotton yarn fabric garment manufacturing. The other one is the pharmaceutical sector with linkage of regional know-how and source of raw material, manufacturing facilities in Mauritius, leveraging on free port regime and marketing on the global arena. This brings me to my second point. The second element is the transformation in the manufacturing industry. While the Mauritian manufacturing sector may be at the crossroad, there is clear evidence to suggest that it has the ability to grow dynamically and support the continued development of the Mauritian economy. A new vision for the manufacturing sector is, however, required, one that embraces upgrading and technological innovation, and that focuses on realizing its potential through both domestic and international markets. This is why the European Union recently supported the government in finalizing the intellectual property regulations that have enabled the Intellectual Property Act to be proclaimed in January this year after a certain time of gestation. As you all know, intellectual property drives economic growth and competitiveness. Intellectual property is today at the heart of any successful business. All of them owe some form of intellectual property. It could be in the form of technology, innovative design, or original works of art, music, and film. Intellectual property protection not only supports the development of knowledge-based industries, but it also stimulates international trade and encourages foreign direct investment and technology transfers. The Intellectual Property Act makes provision for Mauritius to adhere to the World Intellectual Property Organization administered treaties, and notably 3 treaties: the Patent Cooperation Treaty, the Madrid Protocol, and the Hague Agreement. This will provide a mechanism for a single international registration of patent, trademarks, and design, and eliminate the need for filing, prosecuting, and maintaining separate registration in multiple countries. The EU can only encourage Mauritius to complete the accession procedure to these treaties as soon as possible, as simplified procedures will not only bring more clarity and more predictability in the intellectual property legal framework, but will also transform Mauritius into an innovative and competitive hub in this region where the use of intellectual property will be invaluable. I come to my third point, which is the urgent need to have people equipped with the right skills. This is a problem that we face, I think, in many places of the world. Mauritius' existing skill development system appears, however, unable to meet the range and the depth of industry requirements. Many recent reports have highlighted the fact that Mauritian labor skills have not improved relatively to global competitors, forcing an unstable dependence on expatriate labor for low, medium, and high-skill positions, with the latter particularly acute in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics-related occupation, the famous STEM. There is a clear need to focus on basic and intermediate technical education and to raise the high-level STEM capabilities. While there are several institutions working to improve this identified deficiency, the firm-level evidence is that skills development environment is still today deteriorating rather than improving. Most probably, there is no postgraduate technical institutions in Mauritius providing the industry with a pipeline of advanced skills. This is stunting the availability of advanced technical skills, which is central to the development of high-level activities, with most manufacturing value chain based on upper middle income and high-income economies. To respond to this challenge, the European Union, for its part, has provided support to the government in proposing a skills development strategy for the Mauritius polytechnics. A skill need analysis was carried out and curricula developed for polytechnics education in 4 clusters, namely tourism and hospitality, ICT, engineering, and health science. This project also assisted in the preparation of a strategy plan and action plan for the polytechnics. The EU is also providing support to the Economic Development Board in the development of a luxury manufacturing sector in Mauritius. The consultant for this will start his work in April 2022. Let me add that there is another study which has just been asked by the Ministry of Finance and Economy, which is related to the development of a medical and pharmaceutical sector here in Mauritius. We hope that the results of this study will be ready for the next budget, so the budget 2022-2023, so that if needed, finance can be allocated to the priorities which will come out of that study. That brings me to my last point, which is the enabling and reinforcing of a business-friendly environment in Mauritius. In view of reducing the cost of doing business and to improve transparency in regulatory with regulatory authorities, the EU has been supporting the government since actually already 4 years, so since 2018, with the national e-licensing system, which has greatly facilitated and improved the application and processing of business licenses and permits. There are today around 1,000 government officers using the national e-licensing system on a daily basis, and private sector users have already reached more than 100,000. This clearly demonstrates the impact that the national e-licensing system has had in improving the ease of doing business, and as you know, today Mauritius is ranked 13 by the World Bank in that context, which is an excellent performance. Having a common perspective is critical for the future success of the manufacturing sector in Mauritius. This is a growing awareness among policy practitioners that the critical determinant for manufacturing policy is the strategic collaboration between the private sector and the government, with the aim of uncovering where the most difficult obstacles to restructuring lie and what type of intervention are most likely to remove them. This is also where the EU is providing technical assistance with the support of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, in developing, in fact, what we call a regulatory impact assessment framework in Mauritius. This week, actually, tomorrow, the OECD technical experts are in Mauritius precisely to enhance the capacity of Mauritian policy practitioners in fine-tuning the regulatory impact assessment framework. We look very much forward to the adoption of this framework by the government, together with the setting up of the Regulatory Impact Assessment Office. This Regulatory Impact Assessment is a systematic policy tool used to examine and measure the likely benefit, cost, and effects of new and existing regulations. It is an important element of an evidence-based approach to policy making and ensures efficient and effective regulations. So we look very much to your support all so that this process can move rapidly. In conclusion, I would say that despite all these challenging trends, manufacturing sector in Mauritius is still a strong and promising pillar of the economy. A strong manufacturing base needs a level of playing field for companies, an attractive framework for innovation, a high environmental standards, and good working conditions. Having a strong manufacturing base is crucial for the Mauritian economy. With a coherent set of industrial policies, it will help to strengthen the real economy and foster competitive and sustainable industries and services. This is why the Mauritius manufacturing strategy is so important, as it will have to reflect the ongoing transformations as well as the several challenges at hand for society and industry, and say how to address competitiveness shortfall. I wish you very fruitful deliberation and look forward to the revised strategy plan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent Deguerre, for highlighting the importance of this policy dialogue and mentioning important issues for the manufacturing sector, namely skills development, the business environment, and collaboration between the partners. I think the laudable initiative you have taken is to back the Mauritian government in terms of the industrial property. We view that this will have a significant impact on innovation and economic growth in the short term and in the long term. It's very important for the economy, the IP, intellectual property. Ladies and gentlemen, the inspiration behind the organization of this policy dialogue has been the Honorable Minister of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives, Honorable Sunil Dadbola. For the past few years, he has been steering the portfolio of industrial development, we may say with much brio. He has always displayed his unflinching support to the sector. The result is that all the recent indicators for exports are flagging positive numbers. I have now the privilege to call upon the Minister of Industrial Development, SMEs and Cooperatives, Honorable Sunil Dadbola, to deliver his keynote address.
Merci, Monsieur Duban. His Excellency, Mr. Vincent Deger, Ambassador of the European Union to Mauritius, Ms. Isatou Gaye of UNECA, Mr. Robert Banamwan, Team Leader Office of the UN Resident Coordinator, Mrs. Abdul Rahman Ahmed, Permanent Secretary at my ministry, chairpersons, CEOs, MDs, Secretary Generals, and directors of various organizations and institutions present here today, distinguished delegates, captains of industry, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. I will go, rest assured that I will go for a short version of my speech, given the hour of the day, although a longer version would be appropriate in the context the world economy is going through. So let me tell you that I'm so glad to be present this morning to address this August gathering on the occasion of the National Policy Dialogue. This event is a joint initiative between the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, and my ministry. I would like to seize this opportunity to convey my profound gratitude to UNECA and especially to Ms. Bineswari Bulaki for partnering with us to make this policy dialogue another successful milestone in our collaboration. Thank you, UNECA. Ladies and gentlemen, today's event comes at an opportune time when the whole world economy has been severely crippled by the unprecedented onslaught of the COVID-19. The pandemic has had its ramifications on all aspects of life and poses serious challenges to countries all over the world. Since many of the changes brought by the pandemic are transient, it has provoked more intense dialogue between various stakeholders and policymakers. This in a bid to bundle common efforts and seize problems from each other's perspective, find common grounds and reach consensus, if possible, on policy solutions for the construction of the next normal and a prosperous future that the world is looking at after the crisis. However, what is undisputed is that this pandemic crisis and the war between Russia and Ukraine mark a critical juncture. Critical because this would lead to a decisive change in influencing government policy to fuel not only economic recovery, but also identifying new challenges and opportunities that could trigger growth in the manufacturing sector. Today, the manufacturing sector is one of the most important pillars of the economy, contributing to some 13.3% of gross value addition and employing some 90,400 workers. It is important that we sit down to reflect on the plight of our manufacturing sector and gauge the effectiveness of our policy measures and identify new challenges that could bring this sector to new pedestals of growth. I personally view that the organization of this policy dialogue at this stage is crucial for the future development of this sector. There is no time for complacency. We need to reassess the current context in which the manufacturing sector is evolving in a bid to come up with a transformed business ecosystem for a new impetus and greater resilience of our manufacturing enterprises. It will help us together to probe deeply into our respective roles and functions as business operators and government agencies. I am confident that your active participation will unpack many new insights and inspire us to move forward together along a successful pathway. Ladies and gentlemen,
It is an undeniable fact that the manufacturing sector has for the past 50 years continued to be an important pillar of the economy, as I said earlier. However, at several instances of its history, because of major global threats like the liberalization of trade in textile and clothing with the dismantling of the multi-fiber agreement in 2004, the financial crisis of 2007, Brexit, and lately the advent of COVID-19, as well as the emergence of important economic sectors like ICT and financial services in the Mauritian economy, many people question the destiny of the manufacturing sector. Fortunately, this gloomy stance on the sector was overturned by the outstanding resilience displayed by operators and the unflinching support provided by government to assist the business community. It is good to underline that the manufacturing sector has, during these years, undergone substantial transformation. It has graduated successfully from being a low-cost producer of basic products to higher value-added and more sophisticated products. This sector now revolves around innovation, creativity, and value creation through specialized and high-tech activities. Ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that when the COVID-19 pandemic was striking the island and most of our economic activities came to a halt, the export-oriented enterprises sector became the main, if not the sole generator of foreign exchange earnings of the country. This crisis also opened the door for our local manufacturing enterprises to engage in import substitution activities. They resorted to the production of essential commodities like oil, flour, canned food, and noodles to ensure food security for the population. I also wish to underline that our enterprises spared no efforts in catering the sanitary needs of the country by shifting their production line to manufacture important items such as personal protection equipment, masks, sanitizers, and shields. It is high time that we acknowledge the real contribution of the manufacturing sector to the economy. By doing so, we will become aware of the fact that any activity in the manufacturing sector will have an impact on many other sectors. The figures I have cited on the share of the manufacturing sector to the national gross value addition depicts its direct impact on the economy. I consider, however, that the impact of the manufacturing sector goes beyond these figures. Indeed, it is viewed that the activities of the sector have a multiplier effect on the economy and has given a boost to other sectors, including transportation, financial services, and retail trade. The manufacturing sector has also generated a livelihood for many families, particularly those engaged in SMEs. Allow me to illustrate this observation with two examples. The activities of the manufacturing sector have an indirect impact on the transportation sector, which contributes to around 5% of the national wealth creation. It includes the transportation of thousands of workers every day to their workplace, transportation of manufactured products to our port and airport for export, and finally the transportation of these products to different foreign markets by air or by sea. Another indirect contribution of the manufacturing sector is in the financial services sector, which accounts for 12.3% of the economy. I'm sure that our operators will agree with me that the number of banking operations, leasing activities, insurance coverages generated by the manufacturing sector is enormous. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the objectives of this policy dialogue is to assess our achievements, especially after the publication of our industrial policy and strategic plan, which aimed at giving a new impulse and orientation to the manufacturing sector. This document was prepared after extensive consultations with all our stakeholders, and it revolves around important areas of the manufacturing sector. The implementation of the recommendations of the IPSP is well underway, and I have set up an industrial policy executive oversight committee and subsequently 8 subcommittees at the level of my ministry to ensure the timely operationalization of the strategic plan, especially amidst the geopolitical tensions occurring at present. I am given to understand that around 55% of the recommendations are at the implementation stage and that some major projects emanating from the IPSP are forthcoming. I would also like to reassure all our stakeholders that I am personally ensuring that my ministry is following up the implementation of the recommendations made in the workshop on mapping manufacturing skills for the future, organized in November last year. I consider skills development as a critical enabler in the transformation process of the manufacturing sector. This is why I believe that this policy dialogue will be the perfect platform to keep our stakeholders abreast of all information, achievements, and new developments taking place in the sector. When we talk about manufacturing sector in Mauritius, it would be incomplete if we do not give the textile and clothing sector its lettre de noblesse, given its instrumental role in spearheading the outstanding performance of the export-oriented sector in the economy for the 5 past decades. This sector has struggled hard to continue to remain the main subsector of the EOE and has nurtured successfully our competitive advantage in exporting our clothing items. We therefore need to devote some deep reflection on this sector. In this line, a whole day is being dedicated tomorrow to ponder on our achievements in this sector and to define the future course of action together with all our stakeholders. Here I count again on your active participation to make this policy dialogue on the textile and clothing sector a success. It is also the aim of this policy dialogue to assess the impact of the various schemes, budget measures, and special packages of incentives offered to the sector. Our stakeholders will have the opportunity to reflect on these incentives, assess the impact, and come up with new suggestions that could be considered as proposals for the forthcoming budget. I am sure also that our operators will also take the opportunity to highlight and constraints they are facing. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout my tenure of this ministry, I have always maintained a constant line of communication with our business operators to make sure that they operate in a hassle-free environment and allow the enterprise to flourish. During the COVID-19 pandemic, our close collaboration has resulted in a positive performance. It is gratifying to note that all our export sectors in 2021 have registered positive growth. We are leaving no stone unturned to address the local constraint in terms of availability of skilled labor, adoption of new technologies, and access to finance to enhance the competitiveness of our enterprises. Ladies and gentlemen, I have no doubt that this policy dialogue will provide a forum for candid discussions to exchange views on the policies and strategies implemented in the manufacturing sector and serve as an excellent opportunity to move along the various pathways identified. This event will surely help enterprises to achieve the desired objective, tackling the hardships of the pandemic and building resilience for the future challenges of the manufacturing sector through the creation of an enabling environment for sustainable industrial growth. I wish again to reiterate my thanks to UNECA for its collaboration and my team from the ministry for the successful organization of this dialogue. I wish you all a fruitful deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for this very inspirational speech. You have indicated the strategic importance of the policy dialogue for the country, and you have given us the direction in which to take during our discussions on the issues to be considered. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of this opening this official function. We'll have in the afternoon a plenary session, and then afterwards a high-level brainstorming session. So we'll be back in 1 hour, exactly at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much.
Bon, laisse-moi tout d'abord remercier UNECA. UNECA, c'est United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, qui fait partenaire avec nous pour l'organisation de sa policy dialogue sur le secteur manufacturier. Bon, nous tous connaissons que l'île Maurice est une histoire de 50 ans en ce qui concerne le secteur manufacturier, c'est-à-dire tout ce qui est fabriqué à l'île Maurice. Et en face de tout les défis qui peuvent être aujourd'hui, pas seulement Covid, mais tout ce qui peut passer, par exemple la guerre entre l'Ukraine et la Russie, nous devons remettre nous-mêmes en question, revoir une façon qui nos opérateurs fonctionner en face de la compétitivité, en face de la compétition locale qui est capable là, mais aussi revoir les méthodes et les modèles que nous devons adopter dans le secteur. Aujourd'hui, nous devons adopter la technologie moderne. Et quand nous cause le secteur manufacturier, nous cause industrie 4.0. Et dit coûteux, c'est vrai, mais seulement nous ne sommes pas capables de faire sans l'industrie 4.0. Beaucoup de nos opérateurs commencent à adopter, mais nous avons été qui manière nous capables de faire les autres aussi bénéficier de l'industrie 4.0. Nous avons, par exemple, nos clients qui peuvent être de plus en plus exigeants en ce qui concerne la qualité de nos produits, mais aussi en ce qui concerne le timely delivery de nos orders qui nous avons pour respecter. Donc nous pouvons régler tout ça aujourd'hui. Nous sommes contents qu'il y ait différentes institutions et organisations qui participent dans cette policy dialogue-là et qui peut durer de toute manière pendant 2 jours. Et à la fin de cette session-là, ces 2 jours-là, nous pouvons venir avec un papier et nous pouvons aussi essayer de mettre en pratique toutes les recommandations qui peuvent sortir à partir ici. On va dire que le ministère il fixe un objectif dans les 3 ans qui peuvent venir, nous augmente la production, c'est-à-dire le secteur manufacturier, nous augmente tout ce qu'il produit par 50%. Ce qui veut dire que chaque année, nous avons mis un target de 15% d'augmentation. Comme ça, quand nous compound ça 15% pendant les 3 années, nous sommes capables de reach ça 50% là. Mais c'est toujours nous avons mis toute la facilité à notre disposition.
Le ministre, pendant le discours, fait un petit peu le premier dimanche concerné par ce secteur de Maurice. Est-ce que justement, on va dire combien de dimanches concernés?
Écoutez, dans le secteur manufacturier, nous avons à peu près 90 000. On dit un chiffre de 90 400. Mais dans les 90 000, la production expo même, il y en a à peu près 37 38 000. Le secteur manufacturier pour l'expo, il y en a à peu près 37 000. Mais pas oublier que nous, dans le secteur manufacturier, nous aussi produisons pour la consommation locale uniquement. Il y en a certains opérateurs qui font uniquement pour le local, mais il y en a qui font pour le local et l'expo, et il y en a qui font seulement pour l'expo. En tout et pour tout, il y en a à peu près 90 000.
Donc 90 000 personnes qui sont concernées par le secteur.
Voilà.
Right, actually, we're here to accompany the government of Mauritius in its bid to revamp the manufacturing sector in the country, which is really a very important sector in terms of the country's economic development and diversification, and was actually largely responsible for what used to be called the Mauritian miracle in the 1980s. So the sector, we all know, is facing challenges, but then we say that there are opportunities in terms of taking it back to its heydays or even beyond that, by addressing, together. It's something, this challenge relates, let's say, to COVID-19, which has decimated the manufacturing sector industries, particularly MSMEs. Some have fallen on the wayside, others are really struggling. So it's important that we find ways of capacitating these MSMEs to not only survive the pandemic, but to thrive going forward, leveraging opportunities. The pandemic, though difficult, has taught us that we can ride the digitalization wave, and some MSMEs have really done that very well. So it's an area that we think could be leveraged. And of course, the African Continental Free Trade Area, we're talking about like Mauritius being a small country with a small market. And the AFCFTA provides opportunities for a large market of 1.3 billion people, and with a combined GDP of 3.4 trillion US dollars. So in terms of leveraging regional value chains, okay, trading with all these countries that are parties to the AFCFTA, that's really a promise. In terms of the region, that's the Southern Africa region, we have the SADC FTA, and we also have the COMESA FTAs. So this is really very important in terms of leveraging opportunities going forward. And we note the very laudable industrial policy and strategic plan that has been put in place by government. And the ECA is really committed to supporting this. In my statement, I had indicated that in Dubai, in the context of the 2020 Dubai Expo, we jointly organized a seminar on the manufacturing sector, the resilience of the manufacturing sector in Mauritius post-COVID. So going forward, we would be interested in further accompanying the government of Mauritius, particularly the ministry, to implement the recommendations that come out of this very important national dialogue. You will know that following the dialogue, that is today and tomorrow, we'll also be at the the validation meeting of the Mauritius AFTA response strategy, for which ECA provided technical support with financial support from the European Union. So I think that the two events being held back to back, it's really very important in terms of harnessing the synergies. As I said before, AFCFTA promised to be a game changer for African countries, including Mauritius.